So I just saw Zac Efrons' new film, The Greatest Beer Run Ever. But is it the greatest beer run ever? Is it even a good film? Yes. And no. Well, kind of. It's mixed. It may or may not be the greatest beer run ever. It's a pretty apt title. This film centers around Zac Efron's character, who is a man who feels guilty for not going to the Vietnam War. He feels guilty he's not doing anything. All his friends are out at the Vietnam War. And so Zac Efron, in the most relatable moment in movie history, he gets up and he says a big, bold, amazing thing that he clearly isn't going to follow through with the next morning when he's sober. And in this case, he claims he's going to go over there to Vietnam, to the Vietnam War, and give all his buddies that are fighting over there a beer to say, hey, I think what you're doing is pretty cool. Because he's super pro-Vietnam at that point in the movie, and he's all like, yeah, Vietnam's pretty cool, just like those other wars. I support my friends. And the beer, it's like a symbolic gesture, and also it's because he said he'd do it, and they all said, we don't think you'll do it. And he's like, oh, I'm gonna do it. So he does it. The first 30, 45 minutes are really interesting. On one hand, it's kind of this absurdist comedy and this insane, crazy story starting to take place, and, you know, the beginnings of this insane adventure of just like, I cannot believe a human, because it's based on a true story. I cannot believe a human being actually did this during the Vietnam War. This is insane. Like, I think 5 or 6 people in this movie go, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard. That's insane. I'm like, it is insane. But then, you know, kind of, that's the surface level kind of crazy adventure story we're going on. But underneath all of that is kind of the horrors of the Vietnam War and the kind of changing perspective of America from being like, hey, World War I and World War II, we were going to save the world. And Vietnam War, not so much, and kind of that changing perspective of what war is. And that's kind of the main theme of the movie. We start with Zac Efron, who's super positive Vietnam War, but he hasn't like enlisted to go, but he's going to do this thing to honor them, to symbolize that, you know, hey, the boys back here, here's an American beer to say that we're glad you're out here doing, you know, your war stuff here in Vietnam. Zac Efron gives an amazing performance. He's fantastic throughout most of the film. Everyone else is fine. I don't think any of the side characters that he goes to give the beers to, all his friends from back in the neighborhood, they don't really do anything for me. None of them are in it for long enough. It reminds me in this weird way when you're kind of globe hopping in like a Mission Impossible or a James Bond movie where you're like, and now we're in this country and it's all snowy or whatever, but now we're in the desert country and, you know, you kind of spend 5 minutes here, 10 minutes here, and you're jumping across all of them, but you don't really get any time to breathe there. But, you know, in those movies, that works. In this, I kind of feel like I want to spend more time with these characters and to kind of develop them more. I also felt like when the film started and the premise began where it's like, he's going to Vietnam, he's almost like a fish out of water, he's a civilian, he's not like trained for battle, and he's just there to give his friend some beer. But I know what happened in Vietnam. It was not a fun war. I mean, not that there is a fun war, but it's like, you know, you just know what to expect when you get there. And so I was expecting kind of this film that almost starts off as like not like a Euro trip per se. Like, it's still got kind of, you know, a bit melancholy and intense at times about the war before him. But Zac Efron's character is like a frat boy. He's like, you know, drinking a lot. His dad's always like, no one died, sleep until 3 p.m. He's just a drunk. Get out of the house. You know, so he's a frat boy. He's a party boy. He's like, I mean, he literally drunkenly says, I'll take beers to all my friends as this symbolic gesture because I'm sick of my sister and her hippie friends being like, they're all baby killers. War is bad. He's like, that's not bad. My friends are awesome. They're doing God's work. America's work. The president's work. You know, and he's all like in that frame of mind. So when he gets to Vietnam, you're expecting it to just like turn, like the whole film just kind of switch. I was really expecting kind of one of those films, almost like a From Dusk Till Dawn, where it's like, hey, it's just like a hitman, you know, trying to get away from a heist shooty gun movie. Oh no, vampires! And it just turns into a different film. I was kind of expecting that, where it just turns into a different film. But it kind of doesn't. And it kind of had 2 different avenues. Like, one, you do like the Apocalypse Now route, where you just suddenly become this horrible, intense, Full Metal Jacket type of movie. A Saving Private Ryan, a Platoon, another film reference. Or you go down the other route and you kind of go, what is it like if this like drunken party boy like goes and he's like journeying through Vietnam, and it's kind of a satirical take and a dark humorous kind of lens looking at the Vietnam War, and you can make all your kind of political comments and things through that kind of satirical lens. So there's these 2 really interesting ways the film can kind of go after its first act. Which way does it take? Neither. I don't even know what it does. It just kind of stumbles along and he meets someone and then they're like, what are you doing here? He's like, have a beer. They're like, okay. And then he just kind of keeps going on. Nothing is so horrific or so kind of hilarious and satirical and, insane, kind of darkly humorous. It just doesn't really do any of the things the film promises. I think the issue for me is that the potential of this film is kind of unparalleled. Like, there's nothing so emotional and heartbreaking, but somehow heartwarming and horrifying, yet somehow, it shows like the camaraderie and brotherhood of people. Then war. War can really bring out so many horrifying and beautiful and intense, like really intense emotions. What does this film do? It doesn't really do any of them. It just kind of fluffs about, it's like, oh, should we step our toe in this one? Oh, no, that water's too hot. And then it goes to step its toe in this one. And it's like, oh, no, that one's too cold. And it just kind of muddles about. It then becomes, and it doesn't even matter if I agree or not agree. And I mostly agree with what they're trying to say with certain ideas and themes. But it's very preachy. It's very clunky with the dialogue. It's very on the nose. There's no subtlety to any of the dialogue. The script is very, very just like, okay, calm down, maybe don't say, and say, then say again. Oh wait, you're not finished saying? Sorry, apologies for interrupting. Just say, and say again. Don't show me anything. Oh, you'll show me something, but then he'll say something to really rub it in. And as I said, like, it's not even stuff where I'm like, oh, I disagree with that, so I don't like it. Oh, film, stop being so political. It's like, no, it's like, I mostly agree with like sentiments and ideas of the things that are being said, but it's just like the way it's being presented. I feel like at the start of the film, it's really like kind of interesting and intense. Like our main character is so pro-Vietnam. And then the film keeps going and going and going. Then it just like slowly starts getting less subtle, less interesting, less complex. It stops giving us interesting thoughts on either side. And it starts just kind of devolving. The arcs feel really obvious for all the characters. I mean, one character gets an arc. The other characters are Russell Crowe and Bill Murray. They're in the movie. And do you like seeing Bill Murray's face and Russell Crowe's face? Good, because they play nothing stereotypical, just one-note characters. So if they weren't those two actors and they were nobodies, I would find them intolerable and unlikable. But you got Bill Murray and Russell Crowe, so I'm like, I like those guys. Wait, hold on a minute. Were they even real characters? Hold on a minute, movie. You tricked me. That's not fair. That's not cool. You tricked me with sexy, cool, older men. That came out wrong? Or did it? Overall, I feel like the main thing that kind of keeps coming into my mind is wasted potential. This is based off a true story. Who knows how much of it is true? There's a lot of crazy, insane shenanigans that aren't that funny or crazy insane, but they are like, in premise, very insane. And often I was like stretching the imagination of being like, oh, that cannot possibly be how this happened. Because it is like based on a true story. There's a classic moment in a true story thing where they're like, everyone get together and let's take a photo. Because at the end of the film, when the credits play, we'll have the photo we took in the film, but then the real photo. And people will be like, oh, look how similar it is. Oh, he doesn't look that similar. He's less sexy. He doesn't even have a thick, defined mustache. Why does Zac Efron have a thick, defined mustache? Or maybe he usually does, but just in that photo, not so defined. Or maybe it's the camera. It just doesn't like pick up the hairs of the This isn't relevant. I didn't check into the validity of any of the true events or anything. I kind of feel like the film should just kind of, stand on its own. And the whole thing, he did go on a beer run of some sort to give his friends beer. So that part is true, and I think the minutiae of the film don't really matter. The film should just work on its own, and I don't think it does. I think it has so much potential to be something truly wonderful. Like, I don't think it's wasted potential because it could have been a good, fun, dumb, film you just chuck on and you have fun with your friends. I think if this was done properly and really executed to, like, its fullest potential, it could be an iconic war film. There are so many stories where you like watch a movie and you go, I can't believe that. That's just so insane. When then there's those true stories that are even more insane than those insane films that you watch. And you're like, I can't believe this happened. This is crazy. And so it's such a disappointing kind of like feeling to be left with where you're like, oh, it's such a unique, interesting, crazy story. So wild, so insane. It's such a shame. Like, I feel bad for the guy who did the greatest beer run ever in real life. So, should you watch this weekend on Apple TV? The streaming service you probably don't own, but maybe you should get for this movie. Don't get it for this movie. Get it for Severance or Servant. Great shows. But if you already have it, should you watch it? I don't know. Just listen to what I said or whatever. I can't make that decision for you. Stop giving me so much responsibility, man. That's a lot of responsibility. I don't like all this pressure you're giving me. This is not fair at all. If I gave it a rating, 3 out of 10, 6 out of 10, somewhere in there. I don't like giving ratings. Why did I bring up the ratings thing? I've never done that before. It's late. It's very, very late. What is it? If I said the time, you'd be like, that's not late. And I'd be like, well, you don't wake up at 4 a.m. for work, so it is late. It's very late. Thanks for watching, guys. Like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and comment below. I'd love to know what everyone thinks of... What's the film called? Greatest beer run ever.